Hi, this is Chris Legaspi, and in this video, we're going to do something a little bit different here. In this video series, I'm going to talk about how to add more feeling, emotion, and story and narrative to your drawings and paintings. Basically, how to make your drawings and paintings come alive by adding a story and an emotional quality so that you can really capture your audience with something more than just a picture. Now, this video series, I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks and techniques that I've used now and that I've developed to help me do that, to add more story and a narrative quality. And as I talk about these tips and techniques, I'm going to show them being applied to some of my drawings and paintings here. In part one of this series, I'm going to go through the drawing stage of a recent figure study. And then part two of this series, I'm going to share another tip on how to add emotion and story and narrative. And I'm going to break down the second part of the drawing, which would be the shading and the rendering. And part two is going to be available exclusively to subscribers. So all you have to do to get access to part two is head on over to my website and sign up for the free newsletter so you can get access to part two, which is going to be a real nice in-depth narration of the rendering, and as I talk about how I add more feeling into the drawing. Now, this video series was partially inspired by a question I got on YouTube, a comment I got on a video here. This is by PD Pete. And Pete asks, in the video, I asked what kind of content you want to see. And Pete replied, applying feeling and emotion while being technical and accurate. And that's from PD Pete. So thank you for that question, Pete. And to answer your question, the first or the second part, while being technical and accurate, that part is really, that's up to you. So that part just comes with thousands of hours of mileage, the good instruction, putting in your hours, having a good mentor, getting feedback, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. Just putting in your hours, putting in the work, getting the skills. So that part we're really not going to touch on this video, like technical and accurate. You have to come to the table with that. You have to be, a good artist who can draw and have the control of the subject before you will want to add story and feeling and emotion to your work. So that stuff you have to come to the table with, the technical part. So I can't really help you with that here. Now, the first part of your question, applying feeling and emotion. So that's something I've personally been thinking about for a long, long time. So this question by Pete is perfect timing. So thank you for that, Pete. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. It's something that I've been trying to apply to my own work for a long time, which is why one of the reasons why I started doing these morning exercises every day is just to give me an opportunity to work out ideas, work out new techniques, and work out ways to add more emotion and quality, more emotion and story and narrative, because it's something I've been struggling with to make my work better. And in fact, I asked a mentor of mine, Steve Houston, who I deeply admire his work and his advice. And one day I asked him, said, Steve, how can I become a better artist? And he basically replied to me is that your drawings are too, they're basically studies. There's no life in them. So you need to add more life. You need to add something more to your drawing than the technical aspect. And that's really what I was concerned with a lot at the beginning, was just how to be technically good, how to draw a figure and face really well. But once I got past that, once I realized that in order to get that next level of quality, you have to add more than the technique. So that's what I've been focusing on. So in this video series, I'm going to share a couple ideas that I use, starting with the very first tip that I'm going to share. And this one might surprise you. This one might surprise you, and it surprised me. So the very first tip that I want to share to make your drawings better, to add more story, emotion, narrative, and meaning to your drawing. The first tip that I use is to draw and paint in complete and total silence. That's right. If you want to make your drawings better, if you want to add more meaning and story to your drawings, one way that I recommend is to draw and paint in complete silence. That means no music. That means no background movies. That means no humming. And hopefully not too much noise, because what ends up happening is that when you listen to music or when you watch a movie in the background, part of your attention is being diverted, right? Part of your attention is being diverted to what you're doing. And in that aspect, you take away energy from what you're doing. You take away precious energy and mental capacity that you could have applied to your drawing and painting. So a lot of that stuff is being diverted, is being used to process the music. So as much as this first tip surprised me, and I'm sure just like you're a lover of music. You probably be drawing with music, and you love to draw with music, and music can be a source of inspiration. The moment I started to draw in silence, that's when the game changed, because I realized I just had way more energy to put more thought into my work. Really, what it was, I became much more thoughtful because I had more energy to divert into my work, and I had more concentration. I was like totally focused and immersed in the process. So because I started drawing with silence, I could put way more thought and energy into my work. And then that means I can put more thought and energy into the story and into the idea behind the drawing, behind the study. So I hope that gives you something to think about, and maybe come as a shock and as a surprise to you, just like it did for me. But it's definitely worth giving a try. And here's two guys that I respect and admire who back me up. There's two artists that have become quite successful, and they also use this technique of drawing and painting in silence. The first is Rob Ruppel, and the second is Nicolas Bouvier, who also goes by the name Sparth. Rob Ruppel, he's a famous designer, very successful designer, and now art director, who does some excellent work of his own. And in a workshop, I took a workshop with him over in Los Angeles, and he made a comment that once he started drawing and designing in silence, that his work became a lot better. He put more energy into his work. So that was really, really great to hear. And Nicolas Bouvier, also known as Sparth, in an interview, it's actually on YouTube here, I'll put the link below. He, in an interview with Scott Robertson, another famous and successful designer, he mentions how when he stopped using music in the background, that his work also became better, his designs became better, and he was able to add more energy and thought into his work. So I thought that was really powerful to hear. Testimony from two very successful artists on the power of drawing and painting in silence. So to close this out, let's watch the last section of this drawing. This is the end of the drawing portion here of this little demo that I did, one of my morning exercises, and you're going to hear the complete and total silence. This is basically me in my room. I had just woken up, just fired up my sketchbook and started drawing, and you'll hear me drawing in complete and total silence and loving every minute of it. And that's really become the routine for me now, is whenever I want to do a drawing or painting, do a study, and add a little bit more than what it is, I definitely start in complete silence. And here you can see me doing this, applying this in my own work. And this drawing stage is nearly complete. There's really not too much thought into the idea. I do have an idea in mind, and that's the next part. The next tip I'm going to share in part 2 is that I already have an idea or a story in mind that I want to tell. So this drawing is just basically me being more technical. So you're watching more of the technical aspect, but definitely using tip number 1, drawing and painting in silence. is really allowing me to put all of my concentration into not only into the drawing, but now I can add a little bit more to help me describe the story or the narrative that I want to get across in the study. So that concludes part one of this video series. In the next video, in part two, I'm going to share tip number 2 that I use, and I'm also going to, along with that, I'm going to demonstrate it in the actual drawing and rendering stage. So you get to see a full, nice, long demonstration as well as me narrating how to add more story to the drawing and painting. And part 2 is going to be available exclusively to subscribers. So all you have to do is go to my website, www.drawwithchris.com, and there you can enter your email and you'll get instant access to part 2, along with other great exclusive content that I only release to newsletter subscribers, and subscribers also get all the good stuff, all the exclusive content. I release it earlier to them, so they get first access along with other great updates and discounts on courses and things like that. So that's it for this video. And until next time, get out there, keep drawing, and build up your mileage. Bye for now.